I met Elias on what was supposed to be a dull Amtrak ride from Boston to Albany. But fate has its own way of changing course. The train came to a sudden stop in the middle of a remote, wooded area on the outskirts of Massachusetts, after hitting something on the tracks. No derailment, no injuries, just a damaged undercarriage, and we were stranded in the middle of nowhere for nearly 6 hours. The entire group was transported to a tiny town with just one diner, one bar, and a barely stocked convenience store. Passengers crammed into the diner, while, either unlucky or lucky, wandered over to the bar next door. It was quiet. I dragged my small suitcase in, ordered a cold sandwich and a can of soda, and sat silently texting my cousin to let her know I'd be late. Elias sat 2 stools away, also with a suitcase. He started a conversation with a rather silly joke. "Looks like the universe is forcing us to fall in love with nature and isolation." I chuckled, partly because the line was terrible, partly because of the way he said it, natural and unforced. We talked. Elias was around 30, black hair, light stubble, a voice that was deep but warm. He said he was on his way to a job interview in the Hudson Valley, trying to leave the corporate grind behind to do something more meaningful, more real. I shared that I worked in logistics, not exciting but steady, enough to pay the bills, with a little left over for small joys. After a few beers and hours of conversation under the bar's dim yellow light, we exchanged numbers. I didn't expect anything. I figured it would just end there. But Elias texted me the next day. When I got back to Boston, we met up again. He didn't get the job but stayed optimistic. Said there were other opportunities ahead. I didn't press for details. He was funny, a good listener, and seemed like he was searching for something bigger. So we kept seeing each other. Coffee, movies, weekend walks. 3 months later, Elias still didn't have a stable job, but when his lease was about to expire, he brought up the idea of moving in with me. I hesitated, but I wasn't surprised. The apartment I was renting was more central, more spacious, and honestly, I'd been paying for most of our dates anyway. Elias always said he just needed a little more time, that the project he was building with a friend was about to get funded, that things were almost there. And me, tired of half-hearted relationships, believed it. "I don't want to depend on you," he said the night before he moved in. "It's just temporary. I'll be contributing fully soon." My head moved, but my heart hesitated, partly because I wanted to believe him, partly because I was tired of being alone. I didn't know then that it would be the beginning of something I'd still be trying to recover from, one day at a time. I remember clearly the first month Elias moved in. He kept his word, sent exactly half the rent by bank transfer on the first of the month, like a model roommate. He cleaned up, cooked dinner, and always asked how my day had been. Everything seemed normal. Then came the second month. On rent day, he messaged, "The bank's holding the payment because of a system error. Should be cleared in a few days. Is it okay if I'm a bit late?" I agreed. It was just a few days. It turned out to be 9 days. But Elias paid the full amount, along with a lavish dinner he made himself. I exhaled. Then came month 3. The freelance project I'm doing with a startup in Denver is about to get a big round of funding. They're closing the investment soon. I might get a pretty good sum next week to cover everything, Elias said with a smile, spinning his coffee mug like he was describing a vivid dream. I started feeling uneasy, but I reminded myself I had a full-time job with a livable wage while Elias was pursuing something bigger. Maybe I was naive or just too trusting. I paid rent by myself that month, and the utilities, and the internet. Groceries were almost entirely on my card. But Elias still made me feel close to him whenever I was exhausted. He massaged my shoulders after long shifts, told optimistic stories about the bright future we were going to build together. I picked up a weekend job at a warehouse on the west side of the city, working 3 weekends a month to cover the shortfall. By the time I got home after 11 p.m., I barely had enough strength to drag myself into the shower before collapsing in bed. Elias still hadn't landed a steady job, but he was always almost there. 1 week it was a startup in Portland. The next, an angel investor in Atlanta about to sign a deal. And me? I was just spinning in circles with bills. I noticed my wallet felt lighter, Every time I opened the fridge, I wondered why the food disappeared so fast. I started reviewing my credit card statements. Small charges kept showing up. Snacks, online games, cloud storage, even a Netflix account I had canceled the month before. Once, I asked him, "Did you just buy something on the Apple Store?" Elias didn't look up, just replied casually, "Oh, a photo editing app I needed for a demo to send to investors. Just a couple bucks." I was speechless. I'm not stingy, but it was getting harder to ignore that I was being turned into a backup wallet. Things came to a head when I found a $120 charge at a midtown bar on the weekend. Elias claimed he was visiting his parents in Vermont. I asked him. He shrugged. "I stopped by to see an old friend. It wasn't a big deal." I don't know why I stayed quiet then. Maybe I was just too tired. Or maybe I had invested so much into this relationship that I didn't want to admit I might have been wrong. Wrong the day I handed him a spare key. Wrong when I believed temporary meant something with a clear end. Then one late night while I was cleaning the kitchen, Elias stood behind me, arms around my waist, and whispered, "When I make it, you'll never have to work overtime again, you know that, right?" My mouth stayed shut, even my thoughts felt like strangers. I'm not the kind of person who usually shares personal stuff, but that night sitting with Zoe, my best friend from college, at a small cafe in Brookline, the words slipped out. "I'm thinking of canceling the Friday theater show. I'm not even sure I can cover the electric bill." Zoe looked up from her cappuccino, staring at me like I had just confessed something alarming. "Al, you're supporting a grown man. When was the last time you bought something for yourself?" I let out a weak laugh. "It's not really support, just a rough patch." "What kind of rough patch lasts almost 6 months? You're working 2 jobs and he's posting stories about drinking craft beer?" I froze. I didn't know what Zoe had seen, but I knew she wasn't the type to throw out harsh words unless she was sure. I went home that night with a creeping feeling that something was rotting behind the curtain I'd convinced myself was peace. 3 days later, when Elias said he had to attend a networking event on the south side of the city, I didn't question it. I just said, "Okay, but please stop using my card. I'm really tight this month." Elias nodded, kissed my forehead, and grabbed his coat on the way out. At night, Zoe texted me, inviting me to dinner with her and her boyfriend Marcus at a new Italian restaurant in Cambridge. I said yes, not thinking much of it. I arrived early. Zoe was acting strange, glancing at her phone, then at me, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. When Marcus showed up, the whole atmosphere shifted. "I saw Valentina's boyfriend at Ignite's tech launch event last night. Didn't know he got an invite too." I frowned. "Elias?" Marcus hesitated. "Yeah, but he wasn't alone. He was with a petite brunette wearing glasses. They were holding hands. I thought Val was out of town for work." Zoe gently touched my arm and handed me her phone. On the screen was an Instagram account named @ClaireAveryNYC. The latest post was a picture of a diamond ring under string lights, captioned, "I said yes. Can't believe I'm marrying the most amazing man." I felt my chest go ice cold. I scrolled further. There were photos of her and Elias, under a tree canopy in Beacon Hill, in a bar in Salem, the same one he claimed he visited with old friends. A shot on the beach the same weekend he said he was in Vermont visiting his parents. I left the table without a word, looking at Zoe with a hollow gaze. Then I called an Uber straight to the apartment. I opened my banking app. The transactions appeared. Restaurants I'd never been to, a jewelry store in downtown Boston with a charge for nearly $2,600. My heart dropped to the floor. 9 p.m., the door opened. Elias walked in, lightly whistling, taking off his shoes like it was just another normal evening. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, eyes locked on him. "Where were you?" "Networking event. Met a few promising folks. And proposed to Claire, right?" He stopped cold. His whole body stiffened. His eyes met mine, then shifted into something between panic and admiration. "How did you find out?" I held up my phone. "You used my card to buy an engagement ring for someone else. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" He smirked, no trace of guilt. "Come on, Val. Did you really think this thing between us was that serious?" I stood up. I paid rent, covered the bills, stocked the fridge while you wandered around, lied, and lived like a high flyer off my money. Now you propose to someone else and look at me like I'm overreacting? He leaned back, took a sip of beer, and exhaled. You're the kind of woman guys settle for when they've run out of options. Stable, predictable, but not exciting. I don't remember the exact moment I moved, just the feeling of my fist hitting his chest hard enough to knock him off balance. Then I grabbed his backpack and threw it at the door, along with his charger, his coat, his leather wallet, and anything else within reach. You've got 10 minutes. After that I'm calling Claire. And I'll tell her everything? Elias scoffed, but his eyes changed. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He walked out without another word. I locked the door behind him and collapsed to the floor. No tears left, just a slow, hollow ache spreading through my chest. I changed the lock the next morning right when the hardware store opened. It cost nearly $160, a stretch I couldn't afford but had no choice. Just the thought of Elias walking back in with the old key had kept me up all night. I bagged up the rest of his stuff. His sneakers, backup charger, and the massive tubs of protein powder that used to take up half the kitchen cabinet, and left them by the trash bin behind the house. Then I sent Elias a short text. Your stuff is outside, I won't be reaching out, don't come back. Then I blocked his number, email, socials, everything he could use to crawl back into my life. That evening, I sat alone in the cold kitchen, surrounded by hastily printed bank statements from the office printer. The more I flipped, the colder my heart grew. It wasn't just the $2,600 jewelry store bill, not just the times he ordered food for both of us and forgot to pay me back. Elias had added my card to Apple Pay, dozens of sneaky charges, $12, $18, $35, spanning nearly 4 months. Streaming services I never watched, subscriptions for startup founder courses, plane tickets to visit his parents, which were actually getaways with Claire in Newport. Another... Yeah. I sat still for nearly an hour. Then I started writing down every charge by hand. Total $504.87. Not including 3 months of rent I covered entirely. I called the bank first thing Monday morning. The customer service rep's voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. But rules were rules. Elias was an authorized user on my account. The transactions couldn't be reversed. I understand how difficult this must be for you, she said. We can remove his access and monitor future activity, but as for what's already happened, there's really nothing we can undo. I hung up, closed my notebook, and typed up a request for 3 days off. During those 3 days, I cleaned the entire apartment. I got rid of anything that had Elias's mark on it, took down our framed photos, scrubbed the wooden desk where he used to set up his laptop, scraped his name off the mailbox label. For the first time, I played loud music and didn't cook dinner for 2. But the peace only lasted until day 4. That afternoon, while I was cleaning the windows, I saw a familiar figure walking around the narrow path beside the building. I held my breath, hiding behind the curtain. It was Elias. His hair was messy, and he wore that old gray hoodie I'd washed for him dozens of times. He didn't ring the bell, he just stood there for a few minutes, looking up at the second-floor window. Mine then turned and walked away. I waited another 10 minutes before I could breathe again. That night, I asked the front desk to remove his name from the guest access list. I set up a small camera facing the front door. The one I bought with last year's tax refund, originally meant for a trip I never got to take. I knew Elias wouldn't vanish that easily, but this time, I wasn't going to sit and wait to see what he'd try next. Less than 2 weeks after Elias disappeared from my life, I received an email from HR. The company I'd worked at for over 4 years was restructuring. 3 departments were being dissolved. Logistics, my department in charge of coordinating shipments for the Northeast, was on the cut list. Losing my job felt like a punch to the gut. It was the final blow to whatever stability I had clung to for years. I moved through the apartment like a ghost. For the first 3 days, I didn't open the curtains, didn't turn on the lights. I lay on the couch, ate the last packet of instant noodles from the cabinet, drank tap water, and let my mind drift into chaos. On day 4, when my bank app showed I had $78 left, I forced myself to get up. I opened my laptop, revised my resume, and started applying like a machine. Week 1. 24 applications. No replies. Week 2, 31 more. 3 automated confirmation emails, then silence. I started selling off anything of value. The fossil watch I got when I was promoted, a blender that was practically brand new, then the makeup set I saved up for over a month to buy. All of it went on Facebook Marketplace. The prices were embarrassingly low, but they bought me a few meals. I filed for unemployment. The application process felt like writing a full autobiography. Job history, income, expenses, savings account empty. I went to the social services office, waited nearly 3 hours in line, carrying a stack of documents printed at the public library. The result? You previously earned above the threshold. Even if you're currently unemployed, you don't qualify for emergency support. They handed me a list of churches with food pantries. I clutched the printout as the woman next to me asked for diapers. Under those harsh lights, something inside me just shut down. That afternoon, I walked into a free food distribution center for the first time. I kept my eyes low and only whispered a soft thank you. I received a box of nearly expired bread, a few cans of beans, and a dented bag of spaghetti. That night, I ate plain, salted spaghetti and stared at my reflection in the microwave door, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. Someone who used to have a steady job, who once thought she was too strong to ever hit rock bottom. And yet, here I was, sitting in a half-lit apartment to save on power, eating bare noodles, dreading every new debt reminder. On the second day of the following month, I got a warning letter from my landlord. If payment is not received by the 10th, the lease will be terminated. I had exactly $14 left in my wallet. I was so desperate that I was about to withdraw the last bit of my tiny retirement savings when my neighbor, Janine from 3C, knocked on my door. She was in her 60s, known for bringing cookies during Christmas. This time, she didn't bring cookies. She asked softly, "Would you be open to having a roommate? My granddaughter Elena is moving to Boston for an internship. She needs a place for a few months. She's tidy, well-behaved, and can pay 3 months of rent up front." I could barely believe my ears. No thinking, no weighing options, I said yes immediately. 3 days later, Elena moved in. I cleared half the closet, laid out fresh sheets, cleaned the kitchen, and for the first time in weeks, opened the curtains to let sunlight into the living room. It wasn't the light at the end of the tunnel, but it was the first light after a long stretch of darkness. I found the warehouse job through a flyer taped to the community library's front door. No experience required, just physical strength, shift flexibility, and the willingness to accept a near minimum wage. My first shift started at 6 a.m. I arrived by 5:30, hands trembling from the cold, stomach empty after only half a dry sandwich the night before. The work wasn't complicated. Lift boxes, scan barcodes, label items, load pallets, then push them to the delivery zone. But my body wasn't used to it. My shoulders throbbed after a few hours. Nails cracked and bled, and my palms burned from the rough cardboard and straps. I came home unable to stand upright, but at least I had hot water to shower. Thanks to Elena's prepaid rent, I was able to cover the electricity bill, buy some groceries, and save a little for emergencies. After 2 weeks, I got a stable schedule, 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. Not everyone could handle the workload, so the manager gave me priority. In return, I came home every night with just enough strength to survive until morning. I no longer had time to worry about the future. I focused on one day at a time, checking the alarm clock, packing a sandwich, folding my socks carefully so my feet wouldn't blister in the steel-toe boots. Elena was quiet, neat, always paid on time. Occasionally she'd cook extra soup or pasta, knock on my door, and leave a portion for me. I never asked. She never offered. We weren't best friends, but I was quietly and deeply grateful. Then one weekend night, just as I stepped off the bus, I felt something strange, like someone was watching me. I turned around, nothing but streetlights and a few distant pedestrians. I told myself it was just fatigue. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "Val, I'm sorry. Just please read this message. I really have no one else to talk to." I turned off the screen, refusing to give it any space in my head. 3 minutes later, another message came from a different number. "I know I ruined everything. but I'm trying to start over. I need your forgiveness." I deleted everything, turned on silent mode. But my heart pounded harder than in any shift I'd ever worked moving freight. The next day, as I walked out of the laundromat near my apartment, I saw a familiar silhouette across the street. The person had their back to me, wearing an old baseball cap and the leather jacket Elias used to wear. When I stopped, they turned. It was him, Elias. I turned and walked fast, my hand gripping my phone in my pocket. He didn't follow, didn't say a word, but when his eyes met mine, there was no spark, no ache, just cold clarity. It tightened my chest with fear. Fear of being pulled back into the pit I'd spent every day clawing my way out of. The following week, I started receiving handwritten letters. No postmarks. Just plain white envelopes, my name scribbled in handwriting I could never forget. I didn't open them. I carried them downstairs to the trash room, tore them up, and tossed the pieces into separate bags. I kept it from Elena. That chapter of my life didn't deserve space in what I was trying to rebuild. In the evenings, after finishing the final packing slip at the warehouse, I'd sit on a wooden pallet among the stacks of boxes and wipe sweat from my forehead. The yellow lights cast jagged shadows on the floor, and my back ached relentlessly. But no pain made me want to go back. Elias could wait, could send letters, could use a dozen different numbers to text me. But the one thing he no longer had access to was the trust I once gave him. On a December morning, I stood shivering at the Quincy Street bus stop, wind cutting through my thin coat like ice. Next to me stood an older woman, maybe in her late 50s, holding a cup of hot coffee, talking on the phone and complaining about someone at work not organizing the medical supply room. I wasn't paying much attention until she hung up and muttered to herself, "Don't know where to find someone reliable who can even stand the smell of antiseptic anymore." I turned to her. I'm not sure what made me speak, maybe the ache in my back or the rustling sound of instant noodles in my backpack that felt like a wake-up call. "You're looking for someone to organize a supply room?" I asked, my voice almost hoarse. She looked at me surprised. "Yeah. It's a private clinic. We've been getting shipments nonstop and no one's been keeping it in order." I opened my bag and pulled out a wrinkled resume I'd been carrying since I lost my job. I used to work in logistics, almost a year in warehouse operations. If you need someone thorough, I can give it a try. She took the paper and told me to come by the office Monday morning and ask for the manager, Patricia. I showed up on time. The office was small, tucked on the third floor of an old building in Dorchester. The hallways smelled faintly of antiseptic. Patricia, the manager, was eating a sandwich behind a desk cluttered with folders. She glanced over my resume, asked a few simple questions, then got straight to the point. "It's off the books, 20 hours a week to sort supplies and track inventory. If you do well, I'll give you more hours. Sound good?" I responded with a quiet yes. It was the easiest decision I'd made in weeks. She pointed toward the supply room in the back and told me to start that day. That weekend, I quit the warehouse job, returned the key card and gloves. With each step away from that place, I felt my back get a little lighter. The job at the clinic was small but detail-oriented, sorting gauze, labeling medicine batches, checking expiration dates. I worked hard, never complained, always suggested better ways to organize the space. After 3 weeks, Patricia bumped my hours up to 30 a week. The month after, I signed a formal contract with the wage above minimum and basic health insurance. After months of struggling, I finally paid my rent on time. I called the utility company and asked them to remove the red flag from my account. They agreed after seeing I'd made the last 3 payments in a row. Elena, my roommate, noticed the shift. She stayed even though she'd only planned to crash for a few months. We weren't the kind of friends who ate dinner and shared gossip every night, but once in a while, she'd cook extra pasta and leave a sticky note on the fridge. "For Val, you looked tired today." I began repaying my debts. Bit by bit. $50 off my Capital One balance. Then $100. My credit score inched upward. Not fast, but enough to see I was moving forward. I still spotted Elias lurking around the neighborhood now and then, in the back parking lot, at the corner store nearby. I stayed still. Even unknown numbers lighting up my screen couldn't shake me anymore. I knew I had come too far to look back. Sometimes I came across old photos online. Me and him at the light festival last year, holding hands, smiling brightly. I never deleted those photos. But I never opened them again either. One evening, after logging the weekly inventory report, Patricia tapped gently on my desk. Valentina, next week I need someone to reorganize the emergency meds cabinet. I was thinking of assigning it to you. Okay? I accepted the task, then realized I was smiling. It wasn't about the job being easier, or the paycheck being higher. It was about surviving rock bottom, and knowing it, and I was laying each brick of the rebuild with my own hands. I didn't know what I expected when I opened the door that night. A delivery guy at the wrong address? Elena forgetting her keys? But no, the person standing in front of me was Elias. His hair was cut shorter, his beard clean-shaven, no more frayed shoulder jacket or worn-out shoes. He wore a light blue shirt, a gray coat, and in his hand was a white paper bag. But his eyes were still the same, still the look that once made me collapse. "I'm not planning to come in," Elias said immediately, as if he could read the fear in my eyes. "I just want to give you this. Then I'll go." I stood in the doorway, keeping it open just enough, neither welcoming him in nor forcing him out. Elias held the bag toward me, gently, as if it contained something fragile. "I don't need anything from you," I replied. "I know." His voice didn't shake, not desperate. "Val, that ring!" "Daria threw it at my face the night we had our last fight. I kept it. At first I planned to sell it, but then I remembered I bought it with your card." He took a breath. "I'm not bringing the ring as an apology. I wouldn't dare. But it's not mine. It's yours. You have the right to decide what to do with it." I opened the bag. Inside was a black velvet ring box, slightly aged. Next to it was an envelope. I opened it. $1,500 in cash. And a handwritten note. "I'll continue sending the rest. You don't need to forgive me. I just hope you find peace. And happiness." I looked up. Elias had stepped back. "I'm moving to Minnesota. Got a job at a train repair station, nothing big. But it's a real beginning. And this time, there's no one left to lie to." I don't know if I said thank you. I'm not even sure whether my eyes were angry or just empty. But I nodded and closed the door behind him. That night, I left the ring box on the table for hours. The ceiling light reflected on the small stone. Not as big as I thought. Not as sparkly as it looked on Claire's hand in the photo last year. The next morning, I took it to a jewelry shop in Dorchester. The owner looked closely, then smiled softly. "You really want to know?" he asked. "This stone isn't real diamond, it's moissanite. Retail price is a little over $2,000, but for resale, I can give you $925 if you want cash right now." I didn't hesitate. "I'll take it." I walked out of the shop with a receipt and nearly $1,000 in my wallet. I didn't feel regret, just like I had finished an old story. I deposited the whole amount into my savings account, didn't touch it. That night, I called my mother. She lives in New Jersey. The last time we saw each other was at my aunt's funeral 2 years ago. I just wanted to say, "I'm really okay now, Mom." She went silent, then replied, "I knew you would be. I'm just glad you finally said it." I sat by the window for an hour after that call, watching the long streaks of light on the road. A year ago I had sobbed looking at those same lights, wondering if I had enough strength to keep going. Now I'm still in the same apartment, still splitting the electric bill, still eating cheap spaghetti every Sunday night. But I know this time, everything is being built with real bricks. In February, Elena moved out. It wasn't a surprise. Her boyfriend had just gotten a software engineer position in Vermont, and they decided to move in together. Elena hugged me goodbye, left a jar of frozen soup in the freezer and a handwritten note. "Hope future Val doesn't have to think about instant noodles every night." I was the only one left in that still apartment, surrounded by air that no longer felt shared. A kind of quiet that felt comforting, no longer temporary. I posted a new roommate listing, this time more carefully, clearly outlining the rent contribution and non-negotiable boundaries. 3 weeks later, I welcomed Lauren, a sociology grad student, introverted, loved gardening, and always paid every bill on time. She didn't ask much. I didn't share much. We lived parallel lives. Close enough to trust, distant enough not to disrupt each other. Work at the clinic grew more stable each day. I not only managed the supply room but was also assigned to handle incoming inventory and work directly with vendors. Patricia, the manager, trusted me enough to hand over the med storage key, which she said was only for someone who never makes excuses. I volunteered to work Saturday mornings for extra income. No longer working overtime to survive, but to prepare. I wanted an emergency fund with at least 3 months of living expenses. That was the line I drew for myself, and I never wanted to step back across it again. My body still carried the effects of warehouse work. Backaches when the weather shifted, wrists tingling after long days with the scanner. But I learned to treat myself better. Warm compresses, vitamins, and a few yoga stretches each morning. No need for fancy gyms or modern apps, just a few minutes and an old mat. Financially, I paid off my first credit card by the end of April. Seeing the number 0 on the statement brought a sense of relief. I printed that bill and taped it to the fridge as a reminder I had once fallen to the bottom, but I had made it out. I still receive a few strange texts each month, maybe from Elias, maybe not. I don't check anymore. I no longer care who's trying to come back. The one who broke me no longer has the power to define my life. I spend more time with myself, walking in the park, borrowing books from the library, relearning French through podcasts, not to become better for someone, but simply because I want to feel connected to myself again. Sometimes I run into old acquaintances or get messages from college friends. Everyone says I look brighter. Hard to define what that means. Maybe it's the look in my eyes, no longer panicking when the bank sends a notice. Maybe it's how I no longer stay silent in conversations about boundaries and respect. I haven't fallen in love, and I'm not in a rush. I need to be sure that next time I won't build a home on wet sand, won't hand over the key to my life just because someone knows how to say warm things. I learned that, not from a book, not from advice, but from the wounds I've endured. Trust isn't something someone deserves just because they say I'm sorry. It's something built by both sides and protected through actions, not promises. Self-worth doesn't lie in how badly I was hurt, but in how I got back up. Slowly, steadily, and without apologizing for surviving. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning the closet and happened to find the note Elias once wrote. I simply folded it, put it in an old envelope, and stored it in my file box labeled Old Stuff, Lesson Learned. Outside the window, soft sunlight fell on the balcony where I had planted a few pots of mint. Lauren added a lavender plant next to them. We didn't discuss it, but I liked it that way. My new life isn't loud, not glamorous, but it's real, and this time, built by my own hands. Valentina's story isn't just about escaping a toxic relationship. It's a testament to the inner strength of a woman pushed to her limits. From someone who had nearly lost everything, her job, her finances, her trust, she rebuilt it all, step by step, with her own hands. No revenge, no need for validation. Valentina chose healing and reestablishing boundaries. In real life, sometimes the bravest thing isn't moving forward. It's daring to begin again from the wreckage of the past. What do you think of Valentina's journey? Would you be able to forgive in her situation? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real, and meaningful stories about family life.